Hello out there. I'm Chris Bisha, editor-in-chief of 360degreesound.com. I'm joined in this edition by Andrew Gould, New York-based jazz saxophonist, composer, leader, and sideman. Astute viewers of the Amazon Prime series The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel will recognize him from his work on that show. Astute fans of jazz will recognize Andrew as an emerging voice in modern jazz on the rise in New York City and beyond. Andrew released his latest recording as a leader, Pull Up a Chair, featuring Kiyoshi Kitagawa on bass and Kush Abadey on drums in 2023. We met after his set at the Elephant Room in Austin at South by Southwest 2024. I'm pleased to welcome this great talent to our channel. Thanks for joining me, Andrew.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, as I mentioned, we met at South by Southwest after your set at the Elephant Room. So South by is not necessarily known as for jazz. So how did that opportunity come about for you?
Sure, yeah. So basically, that was all through the recommendation of the label Pinch Records, that put out my last album, and the owner of the label, Scott Linner, just basically hit me up and was like, "Hey, South by Southwest is doing jazz. Are you into it?" And of course, yeah, totally. I've never been to Austin, Texas before. I've heard about South by, but only more like pop, R&B sorts of things like that. And so I figured, wow, cool, they're doing jazz. Yeah, let's check it out. And so he sent in like an application for me that we kind of put together, and sure enough, we got a slot and made a whole thing out of it.
That's great. That's a great room too, the Elephant Room.
Yeah, it was a really good vibe, just like everybody's there to just have a good time and listen to music and chill out. So it was definitely a really good positive energy in the room.
Yeah. It seemed like a good atmosphere for your style as well. And since I've been listening to your stuff on Spotify, I listened to Pull Up a Chair while I was painting my daughter's room. Actually, I was cycling through all your recordings. So now Spotify has recommended a playlist based on my listening. And so many of the artists, while they're contemporaries of yours, are stylistically quite different, sort of more fusiony, funk with electronic elements. Your music has a strong bop element at its core to me.
hmm
So what elements are you bringing in to create your style?
Yeah, for sure. So I think, with this latest project, just the trio, which is just me, acoustic bass and drums. Certainly there's a lot of more traditional jazz kind of factored into that. But also, if you listen to the album, there's more funk and groove related. There's at least two or three songs in there, and some songs go more that way. And that whole style and element of playing has always been a big influence on me too. So I think, you know, um, through the magic that is Spotify algorithms, I still wound up getting sort of associated with that. And then I have other albums and other projects too where I've done more things. So I think probably it factors me as an overall artist in with more music like that. But from the get-go, my main like meat and potatoes has always been more, traditional jazz and bebop. So that's always going to be present in what I
Mhm.
do.
Yeah. No, it's great. I really that's my thing in jazz. I really like that traditional sort of modern style, the classic jazz, and you're really channeling that. So I'm really digging it. And I did read where you were inspired early on by Cannonball Adderley's record Something Else, which totally makes sense, having spent some time with your stuff. What was it about that recording that made an impression on you at that time?
Yeah, for sure. I think it was just like the sound, like everybody's tone. Like the sound of that record and everybody's sound on their respective instruments, it's just like it's completely magical. Like there's really not a single note out of place, arguably, on that whole album, and everyone just has such a beautiful sound, and even like the mix of it all, it's just like perfection. But that was the first record that I really heard when I started studying, how to play the saxophone. And so I heard that, and I heard that alto sound of Cannonball Adderley's, and it just instantly struck me as that is the most gorgeous sounding saxophone I have ever heard. And I want to sound like that. And fast forward 20 something years and I still feel exactly that way. And the record still has the same exact effect on me.
Timeless. For sure.
Yeah,
And your
really.
music has that same vibe, very timeless sound.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. I so appreciate that anybody would mention my name in the same context, but I'll take it. Thank you so much.
No, I was reading also that you'd performed at the Charlie Parker Jazz Fest in New York, and yeah, I hear echoes of Bird in your playing as well.
Oh, yeah, I mean, he was really one of the guys that I've studied the most, just playing along, transcribing, trying to emulate every little detail. Yeah, he's definitely, and he's at the root of so much. If he didn't exist, so much of what has become jazz saxophone, who knows where it would be. But he was really one of the pioneers in so many ways, and set the bar and the precedent. So yeah, pretty much if you play the jazz and you play the alto saxophone, I don't know if it's even possible to not be influenced by him. So
Exactly. Yeah, well said. But I also read where like 90s rock, like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Rage Against the Machine were influences on you early on as well.
yeah, that's because that's just the music that I grew up with, that we had in my house, and even my mom had like tape cassettes of those bands like Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Stone Temple Pilots, Red Hot Chili Peppers, The Offspring. So that's the music that I first heard when I was a kid that I was checking out because it was in my house and I listened to it and I loved it. So yeah, that like the energy and the rawness that that music had, like I always really loved too. And it took a really long time to equate, it felt like a very separate world, that music, in comparison to studying jazz and playing the saxophone. It wasn't until years later, like fairly recently, really relatively, that I realized, it's all one and the same thing. There's only 12 notes and there's different styles, but, they're not these separate entities that are like an ocean apart. They're all part of the same thing.
Mhm. Yeah, music of that time, kind of had more of an angular kind of groove to it, similar to bebop.
For sure. Yeah, there's so many common elements, and it's really all put together with the same building blocks. It's just, there's so many things sonically that are different about it, and
Sure.
style wise, it feels like it's far away, but then, after graduating school and starting to play gigs and getting calls for things that weren't just playing Donna Lee, a popular bird tune, I realized, wow, okay, I have to play this music now. This is a little closer, and more similar to what I grew up with, and then also learning about all these other styles that I didn't know about, and I love it all. Like I love trying to play all different types of music, and so through that process, which has been a big steep learning curve,
Sure.
you realize that, like, it's all connected. It's all one and the same thing.
Yeah. And it's great that you're channeling that stuff because you have that advantage, that benefit of having heard so many different types of music since sort of the origins of bebop and what Bird was doing back then. So it's cool that that comes out in your composition and in your
Thank you.
playing.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just, I think it's not even so much of a conscious thing. It's
right.
just try to just think of a melody that inspires me and then develop it and go with it. And then it
Yeah,
winds up kind of being what it is. But
yeah.
yeah,
It's like,
even yeah, sure, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say that Bird talked about the revelation that he had that allowed him to play what was in his head. So he was just trying to figure out how to communicate what he was hearing in his head. So you're hearing all these other different things in your head as well, which are coming out very organically.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for the organic element of it, where it's just, I mean, being in the practice room and thinking about it and putting everything under a microscope is super important. But I think then, like, when you go to play, like, you just have to sort of, and there's even a Bird quote which is very similar to this, where he just says you got to learn it all. Basically, I'm paraphrasing, but you have to learn it all, then forget it and just play. He says that, and like that's so much the essence of what I think it's about. What it's about to me is, like, all right, I'm on stage now. Like, whatever I've learned thus far is that's where I'm at. So I'm gonna trust in that and try to make the best of it and just go with how I feel and make music and converse and interact and make it happen however I can, and
And there's a
yeah.
yeah, yeah, you quote your teacher George Garzone in one interview that I read, where George told you, "Chill the fuck out and play."
Exactly. Couldn't have said it any better. I mean, yeah, that's another thing I try to tell myself. It works to varying degrees, but I try to tell myself that, before every time I play too. Just all right, just chill out. Like let it all flow.
Yeah, just relax and let it happen. Good
Hmm.
advice. So you studied at the Manhattan School of Music, right?
Yes, yes.
With George Garzone, as I mentioned. And another quote that I read of yours, you quoted him. Well, no, you said George made you approach the horn and improvising in a different way. What can you tell me about that stylistic shift for you at that time?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, it's very much tied into the first quote, which is just chill the fuck out. But basically, when I started hanging with George, which was my master's degree, at Manhattan School of Music, I was just really bent on just trying to make sure that everything I played, I nailed. I was nailing the harmony and outlining it all very specifically and playing inside really well, just, you know, diatonically and clearly. And so if you ever listen to George, I mean, he can certainly do that as well as anybody, but he likes to really kind of also step away from the harmony and play more things that imply more attention to the harmony for longer periods of time and then smack back into it. And so that was one of the main things he started instilling in me. It was just like, man, it's okay to be dissonant. It's okay to leave the harmony, and there's all sorts of ways to do that. And so it kind of just made me loosen up a little bit with the idea of feeling like I needed to just nail every eighth note of every single chord change in every single song. So that was one thing. But then also even just like with how I would play the saxophone, time wise and articulation wise, like he definitely encouraged me to kind of play a lot more legato and play phrases that were just smoother and didn't feel as jagged with the time or not feel like I had to tongue every note, or tongue in as patternistic of a way to kind of loosen it up and think more about the phrase and play legato. The time comes from your fingers when you're playing lines, right? Because just pushing down a key and changing, even just going from like a B to an A on the saxophone, you just do this, right? And you don't need to tongue it, right? Just literally by just changing your fingers and pushing down the A key and making the A happen, that's an articulation in and of itself because you
Hmm.
hear the start of a new note. So if your fingers land really well in time, then it makes you realize you don't actually have to tongue that heavily usually, and you can save the heavier tonguing more for your accents and more. It's more of a punctuation rather than a statement of the time in that style. If you're gonna play more like James Brown, Maceo Parker funk, where you're like repeating the same note a bunch more, it's a little bit of a different style. But yeah, it kind of it sounds like a minor thing, but when you're a student and you realize like it really just kind of blew the sky open for me as far as like wow, I don't really need to worry about this as much. I can really let go of a lot of these things that I thought were so important, and it sounds a lot more loose and free and relaxed now.
Yeah, sort of let a little more of sort of you come out as well. And I
For
like that
sure.
that notion of the contrast that you can create in articulation by the tactile, uh, you know, sensation of changing notes. That's awesome.
Yeah, he was really like, the time comes from the fingers,
Mm,
and you think about your fingers either landing or lifting off the horn because it
right.
goes both ways, right?
Yeah.
As like with the precision of a drummer or a percussionist,
Yeah, it's almost like guitar, right? Like pull-offs and that type of thing in a way.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing. Like we're all percussionists, we're
Right.
all playing rhythm, whether we realize it or not. Like we're still playing rhythms by playing notes too,
Yeah.
So that's really the single most important element is the rhythm, even more arguably than melody. And I think both melody and rhythm are maybe a step above importance than harmony.
Hmm.
No, it's of course arguable and it depends on the style and all sorts of stuff, but in a very general sort of way.
Yeah. And your style is very percussive, like in terms of the rhythm that you play. There's a lot of sympathetic action between you and the drummer, which is a great segue into talking about Pull Up a Chair. So let's
Mhm.
talk about the new record. It sounds very refined, like you're definitely dialing in what you want to say with this record. Um, so how does it represent the growth, your growth as an artist, since It Takes One to Know One, which I think was the previous record?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I think Pull Up a Chair for me was the whole album is dedicated to the idea of having, having a kid, which now my daughter is 4, and the idea of, literally pulling up a chair, like adding someone to the mix, adding someone to the table or the family in this case.
That's beautiful.
Um, so yeah, I think it's just the next evolution of, if you want to call it that, of just like where my head is at musically, I really always love saxophone trio, like just saxophone, bass, and drums. I like the more minimalist kind of broken down feeling of it. There's a little less going on. Not that I don't love playing with piano or guitar or any chordal
Mhm.
comping instrument too. That's, amazing. And that can add so much. But I think, just it kind of chills me out in a way, like where I can just there's less to focus on and less to interact with, and there's more space, and the harmony isn't being outlined as clearly, and I can kind of take what I want with the harmony and make my own thing with it, because there's, if I decide I want to make a minor chord dominant, for instance, it's not really going to clash with anybody in the same way that it will as if
Mm.
the piano player is there. Certainly, good listening piano player will react, but the idea of it kind of being a little bit more broken down, a little bit more relaxed, um, feels like there's more space to me, and that helps me to chill the fuck out and play a little more too, which I felt like I tend on my reflecting on my last 2 records, I feel like I felt like I needed to prove myself and play and just let everybody know, here's all the saxophone that I can play, and here's me playing fast, and here's me doing this, and you know, um, yeah, the idea of just sort of demonstrating as too much of a priority, whereas this is a little bit more just like I just want to let the music flow, and I didn't feel like I needed to really prove myself in the same way. I don't know.
Oh,
That's something you always kind of struggle with.
yeah, that's
I,
interesting.
I do.
Yeah, that's really mature. It's a very wise way to describe your progression.
Yeah, thanks. It's always, it's always a process, and that's one thing I just wind up, kind of realizing when I listen back to myself and things, I always try to realize what I like and what I don't like and what I would want to change and how I can go about that, and so
Mhm.
I'm really, really happy with this last record in terms of that because I feel like I'm just kind of playing and I just more musical to me. It's more how I would want to play all the time.
Mhm. Yeah, it's got a great energy to it. I mean, like I said, I was painting and I'm like, yeah, next tune, great. This is awesome. I
Oh,
really,
thank you.
it's a fun record as well as being, technically outstanding. But you mentioned instrumentation. So tell me about the trio a little bit. Kiyoshi Kitagawa, you played with, I think, on the last record, and then Kush Abadey on drums. Were these the guys that were with you at South by, correct?
No, no,
No,
unfortunately
okay.
they weren't. No, it's the guys at South by were all closer to Texas. It just happened to be that one of my good friends and also favorite drummers, Peter Kronreif, was not far away from Texas. And I knew he travels all over the place. So when I knew I was going to go to South by, I was like, Peter, you're not going to be anywhere near Texas like during South by Southwest. And he's actually, I'm just finishing up a bunch of gigs with Remy LeBoeuf, who's another great outdoor player and friend of mine in Colorado. I'm not going to be that far away. So I was able to get Peter to come down not too far. And then I got a recommendation for a fantastic bass player, Ryan Hagler, who's actually local to Austin, Texas, who came and played. So they came and learned the music and absolutely crushed it.
Cool. Yeah,
For,
that's
for
great. We were sitting way in the back. I could see you stand there, but I couldn't really like get a good view of everybody else. So, well, that's great that you were able to find great players for South by. But so what? Tell me a little bit about the trio for the recording.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, Kiyoshi, I met through my friend Sam Dillon, who is actually the co, I guess you could say the co-artist for my prior record, It Takes One to Know One. And he's like an old high school friend of mine, and we, came up playing together. But he knew Kiyoshi a bit. I forgot how, but he recommended Kiyoshi for the last record, and I've always been a huge fan of Kiyoshi. He plays on some of my absolute favorite albums, one of which is Kenny Garrett Trilogy, which is one of my favorite saxophone trio records he played on. And so I really hit it off with Kiyoshi stylistically and musically on our last record and on a bunch of live gigs. So when I wanted to do the trio thing for this new album, I mean, he was clearly the guy I was going to ask because that's like entirely his thing. And then on drums, yeah, Kush was my guy. He had played a lot. I had played with him a bunch before on live gigs and always loved it. I met him actually playing together in Wallace Roney's band. I think he played. We played a bunch. That was the band that I played the Charlie Parker Jazz Festival with actually. But I played a bunch with Kush there, and we knew each other. And then we played a bunch of other small group gigs together over the years, and just loved his relaxed feel. And I knew he would work so well with Kiyoshi, and it sure did. It was like really a cool combination of players.
Yeah, you and Kush work extremely well together on the record.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, he's awesome. He's like just so relaxed and so musical and clear, and yeah, I love
Yeah,
playing with him.
and he seems to inspire your phrasing, in your solos as well.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so. They both do, really. And
Mhm.
Kiyoshi has such an interesting way of kind of playing the harmony, but also getting up in the cracks and filling up and um, just making things happen in the trio format. He would do so in any format, but really in this band, like he made the music. They both made the music come to life in such an awesome way.
Mhm. That's cool. Yeah, so I was interested in some of the titles. Submarine Station, Captain Barnacles. Sounds like somebody's been watching some Octonauts, Andrew.
As a fellow father, as I know you are, you're familiar with where those titles come from. Yeah, Submarine Station was basically, us building Lego like Octonauts, the submarine. There's like a submarine station called the Octopod, and so my daughter always says she called it the submarine station. I want to build a submarine station, so we'd play with Legos and do that. And the whole tune was meant to encapsulate the idea of just like we're sitting together on the floor and playing and making things out of Legos and having fun and just like
Mhm.
a funky good time.
That's cool. Yeah. And I love Captain Barnacles as well. When I saw that title, I was like, yeah, this is my guy right here.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So many of my friends are like, dude, you have a song named Captain Barnacles? What? What is that from? I was like, you'll know one day.
Bad
But
jazz, man.
yeah, it was they were just fun titles.
Yeah.
That it helps me to sometimes just like have an image or a very loose idea of a scenario, and
Yeah.
then, then write with that like loosely in mind, and
Hmm.
helps things
Yeah.
come together.
Very cool. The apnea is one of my favorites, and it's got this trippy kind of halting groove, and it actually sounds like someone waking themselves up, like in and out of dreams. To me.
Yeah, man, thank you. Well, mission accomplished then. That was also written because, like I said, the whole album is based on having a kid and my daughter. So, yeah, she had obstructed sleep apnea, which is basically like when your tonsils or adenoids, in her case, both were so swollen that she couldn't really breathe at night. And every 10 seconds she would be waking up and
Oh,
gasping for air. And yeah, it was the whole thing. That's done now.
good.
It's all fixed and everything is cool. But yeah, it was a stressful time where nobody was getting a lot of sleep, and we were really worried about her. So yeah, that tune is kind of very much based on the idea of the overall kind of feeling of apprehension. Like, is she okay? Is she gonna take another breath? And that stressfulness.
Yeah, that's nerve-wracking. Well, I'm glad she's okay. But it
Thank
definitely got that vibe. I mean, you just told the story, and I'm like, I can totally hear that in that tune. But then like story time is just delightful. You got a little bit more space in there and more sustain, a little slower playing with more sustained tone.
Yeah, and and that's, pretty clear what that one's about too. It's
Yeah.
just the idea of winding down and laying in bed and reading a book and slowly kind of, drifting to sleep in a peaceful manner,
Yeah. And then you mentioned the funk earlier, and I love Cheesy Scramble, man. What a funky ass jam. It's so cool.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that one is basically, because kids can be very picky eaters. And if we called eggs, you wouldn't want to eat them. But if we called them cheesy scramble, all of a sudden, oh, cheesy scramble, let's try that. So we still to this day we call it, you want some cheesy scramble? And that's, so I just thought, and just the idea of dealing with a stubborn kid, trying to get her to eat and finding,
Mhm.
a ridiculous name to call food to make her eat it, just like that.
Yeah.
That struggle has a funkiness and a quirkiness to it, you know.
Yeah. That's cool. What's your daughter's name?
Ina,
Ina.
INA. Yeah.
Right. Beautiful. Um, yeah, and then the here nor there, I love there's like a lot of intuitive interplay between you and the rhythm section, and Kush in particular on that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that one similarly is a little bit about the stubbornness of a kid, but more that's like the exact matter of it, where it's just the tune, if you listen to the melody, kind of has these stops and starts and a couple of odd bars that are, it's not all on fours, some bars of 2/4 and stuff in there, and hits off the beat. And that's just meant to kind of symbolize, the indecisiveness of a little kid, like, I want this, no, I want this, I want to be here, no, I want to be there, so here nor there.
It's great. I love that. Um, yeah, and yeah, so I also dipped back into your earlier recordings, and I really dug "It Takes One to Know One." It's not common to, at least in my experience, to have sort of two sax players, being sort of the melodic element of a quartet. But I really love the way, especially in the heads of the tunes, that you and Sam, because Sam's on tenor, right, and you're playing alto. Just the interplay of the horns in the heads is fascinating.
Thank you. Yeah, Sam is like one of my oldest friends. We're best friends. I'm gonna go over his place literally tomorrow because we're gonna record a new record actually.
Okay.
That's gonna be the follow-up to "It Takes One to Know One" on this Monday. So we're gonna hang out tomorrow and go over the tunes and put the finishing touches on everything. But yeah, we play together literally thousands of times and on thousands of gigs at this point. And so like he knows like there's not even a wave of intonation like between us. He's just super effortless to play with, and yeah, we've had this very awesome kind of like friendship and relationship where we're just always trying to both get better at music and drawing inspiration from each other and coming up with ideas. Hey, check this out. What are you working on? I'm working on this. Check this out. What do you think about this? How does this read sound? All sorts of
Mhm.
stuff. So, yeah, we had definitely have like a super close musical relationship. So
That's
that's why we
cool.
really want to make a project out of that whole thing too. And, this Monday we're going to record a new album now. So we're really excited about that.
That's awesome. Yeah, the track "Dill" really just jumped out at me. I was like, wow. It just, had this unique character to it with the interplay of your horns.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a track kind of with inspiration from from a tune called Wayne's Thang, which is on that record I was mentioning before, the Kenny Garrett trilogy that Kiyoshi played bass on, and he plays bass on Dill as well. And it's the same harmonic structure, different melody and slightly different form in the head in, but yeah, that's kind of a funky one. I really like how that one came out.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, I love and your early stuff is great too. I really like your music, man. I just
Thank
want you to
you.
understand it.
I
Like, I
so
play
appreciate it.
myself. I play sax, and it's really inspiring me because I really want to get back into playing. And I've been, sort of contributing some horns on a recording of my friend who's kind of doing some Muscle Shoals kind of horn stuff. And I'm just like, man, when I listened to your stuff, I was like, man, I got to get back into this.
Ah,
And
awesome.
yeah, I know that you do a lot with education. So I'm
Mhm.
interested a little bit in your education endeavors because some players do it for the money, to smooth out the income stream. I'm just wondering, why you dedicate your time to music education.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess I never really like separated it, you know. Part of all my teachers and idols as I came up, you know, I mean, they were my teachers, you know, so I learned because of them, and they were the people that inspired me. So when I started getting more serious and started getting asked to play, people would ask me for lessons or ask me to teach this or that, and I never really distinguished between the two. That's just, to me, that's just kind of part of being a musician also, you know. So yeah, of course I'm gonna do it. I never really thought of it as like being a way to make ends meet, but certainly it is. And I think you kind of, as a musician these days, and like a freelance saxophone player in New York City, as I am, like, yeah, you kind of have to be open to all these options. You have to be able to do all that stuff, you know? And teaching is definitely a big part of how I'm able to make ends meet, you know? So yeah, but it's not, I never really thought about it like, oh, I better teach, otherwise I'm going to be homeless or something. Like it just was a natural part and expansion on being a musician overall, you know.
Mhm. That's wonderful, man. It's like giving back and paying forward, right?
For sure. And you know, like I said, like I was so inspired by so many of my teachers, you know, and like if I wind up having a student that comes to me and is like, man, like I'm really inspired to play and to learn, you know, especially to learn from you, you know, like, man, like if I can be that source of inspiration for someone else, and like, geez, like there's no better feeling ever. It's like the most
Yeah,
flattering thing in the world. But also like, man, I want to help them. Like I want to impart information on them and help them, you know.
yeah,
And I think the more we all do that as teachers or even just as artists in general, like the more people start to realize, oh, this music is cool. Like let's check it out. You know, that's how it stays alive, you know.
yeah, yeah. I wish I still lived in New York, so I could be one of your students.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I do teach online. I actually most of my
Okay,
students are online students right now, so
all right.
go figure.
Okay, well, thanks again for joining me, Andrew. I know you're busy, and I really appreciate your time. And everybody out there, please give Pull Up a Chair a spin. I guarantee you're going to dig it. Are physical formats available?
Yes, I actually just got well, one second. I got these in the mail like last week. I
Oh
got
yeah,
vinyl, which I'm really excited about. I've never had an album of my own on vinyl, so that's kind of
very
cool.
cool.
But yeah, I have vinyl available. You can go to pinchrecords.com and grab a copy there. They're selling them. I think they're like 25 bucks.
Okay,
And then I also have CDs. You can get them on Bandcamp or just shoot me an email even, and we'll figure it out.
okay, sounds good.
Um,
And you can follow Andrew on Instagram at Andrew_Gould and visit his site, andrewgouldmusic.com. I'm Chris Bisha, 360 Degree Sound. Join us again soon for more great chats about music from all angles. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.